They said the explosion took everything: his unit, his mission, and the dog he trusted more than his own brothers. But 3 years later, in a quiet town in Oregon, Noah Carter heard a bark that made the world stop. It wasn't just a sound, it was a memory clawing its way back from the grave, and when he looked into the kennel, the eyes staring back weren't just familiar, they were pleading. Why did you leave me? What happened next? Wasn't just a reunion, it was a reckoning. The fog rolled in early over the sleepy town of Evergrove, Oregon, clinging to the tall pine trees like cobwebs stretched by invisible hands. It was the kind of morning that muted sound and turned breath into ghosts. The sky hung low in a haze of gray. Streets were empty, but for the distant crunch of tires on damp asphalt and the occasional bark echoing faintly through the mist. The smell of wet cedar and distant wood smoke lingered in the air, a scent that spoke of quiet winters and things buried long ago. Noah Carter parked his rusting blue Ford F-150 in front of the Evergrove Animal Rescue Shelter, the truck coughing once before settling into silence. He sat for a moment, staring through the fog at the low wooden building ahead. It was simple, painted a soft green with peeling trim, a handmade sign swinging gently in the cold breeze. Evergrove Animal Rescue. Kindness is our mission. A smile tugged half-heartedly at his mouth. He didn't know what compelled him to stop by. Maybe guilt, maybe restlessness, maybe something he didn't have a name for yet. Noah stepped out, boots landing on damp gravel with a soft crunch. He was 32 tall with broad shoulders, though he'd grown leaner since leaving the Navy. His hair, once a sun-bleached blonde, was now darker unkempt and curling slightly at the ends. A few days' stubble lined his jaw. He wore a faded black hoodie and jeans, the cuffs frayed, a patch on one knee. There was a hardness in his eyes, the kind that came from seeing too much too young, and a quietness in his steps that never quite left him, even in civilian life. Since returning from Syria, he'd lived alone in a converted cabin near the river, fixing old boats and rebuilding motorcycles in the garage he barely heated. A man surviving more than living. He carried a cardboard box filled with old towels, dog toys, and several bags of kibble donations he'd collected through a local veterans group. Nothing much, but enough to help. As he pushed through the shelter's front door, a small bell chimed overhead. The lobby was warm, the scent of pine cleaner and animal musk mingling in the air. A woman behind the counter looked up and offered a tired but genuine smile. "Morning." "Welcome to Evergrove Rescue," she said. Her name tag read, Dina. Dina was in her late 40s with shoulder-length auburn hair held back by a clip. She wore a green fleece vest over a long-sleeve shirt, and her hands were still damp from cleaning. Her face was round, freckled, and bore the kind of calm practiced by people who'd seen both cruelty and kindness in equal measure. "Hey, I've got some donations from the Vet Outreach Group," Noah said, setting the box down. "That's great." "We appreciate every bit," Dina replied, moving around the counter to peek inside. "This'll help a lot, especially with the weather turning." She paused. "You looking to adopt?" "No," Noah said quickly, then hesitated. "Just helping out today." Dina nodded, not pushing. "You're welcome to look around. Some of the dogs might bark, but most just want a little attention." He gave her a small nod and turned toward the hallway. It was quiet back there, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. Kennels lined both sides, wire doors, concrete floors, a few blankets or chew toys inside. Some dogs stood to attention as he passed, tails wagging. Others stayed curled in corners, wary or resigned. But it was at the far end, the third cage from the back, where he heard it. A bark, short, sharp, familiar. Noah froze. The sound echoed through him like a thunderclap, knocking the breath from his lungs. He hadn't heard that bark in 3 years. Not since Syria, not since Scout. His steps were slow, deliberate, drawn forward by some invisible tether. He rounded the corner, and there he was. The golden retriever stood still behind the bars, his coat a dulled honey gold, slightly matted near the hind legs. He was larger than Noah remembered, more filled out, but unmistakable. His eyes, rich amber, ringed with a darker gold, locked with Noah's wide with stillness. His ears pricked forward. His tail didn't wag. Not yet. It was stiff, waiting. Scout didn't move at first. He tilted his head just slightly, as if unsure if what he was seeing was real. Noah dropped to his knees. "Scout," he whispered, barely audible over the silence. The dog's posture shifted, eyes flooding with light, and a low, aching whine spilled from his throat the same sound he used to make when Noah came back from long patrols. Then the tail thumped once, then again. Scout pressed his body against the bars, desperate to get closer, letting out a short bark and another whine that cracked through Noah like a blade. Noah's throat tightened. His hand moved forward on instinct, fingers brushing against the cold steel reaching. Scout licked the air near his fingers, then whined again, pawing at the cage. From behind him, Dina's voice broke the moment. "Sir, careful. That one just came in a few weeks ago. No chip? Barely lets anyone close." Noah didn't turn. "What's his name?" "We've been calling him Lucky. Railroad worker found him limping down by the old tracks. Scars all over. Wouldn't eat the first 3 days. That's not Lucky." Noah said softly, eyes never leaving the dog. "That's Scout." Dina was silent for a beat. "Scout. He was my partner," Noah said. "We served together in Syria. They told me he died in an IED blast. I never saw the body." The weight of the moment settled like fog around them both. Dina knelt beside him, watching the interaction, the trembling joy barely contained in the retriever's body, the way Noah whispered his name like a prayer long buried. "I'll get the keys," she said quietly. As she stepped away, Scout let out a soft huff and pressed his head between the bars, nose brushing against Noah's wrist. Noah scratched gently behind the ear, finding the old spot that used to make Scout's left leg twitch. It twitched. Noah laughed softly, a sound strangled with disbelief. 3 years, he said. 3 damn years, and you found your way back. Outside, the fog was still thick, curling around the shelter like breath made solid. But in the small room at the end of the hallway, something sacred had cracked open, a wound beginning to heal, a reunion that no one had expected. And though neither of them could explain the years in between, both man and dog knew what mattered. Scout was home. The sky above Evergrove had shifted from fog to a thin gray drizzle by the time Noah pulled into the driveway of a small house tucked behind a grove of cedar trees. The place was modest, with green shutters and a crooked porch swing, but it looked warm, lived in, unlike the empty shell he called home. The house belonged to Abby Monroe, the woman who had taken Scout in, or rather Lucky as she knew him. Scout sat in the back seat of Noah's truck body, still ears alert. He hadn't eaten since they left the shelter. Every time Noah stepped away, Scout would whine softly, refusing to let distance grow between them. His fur was duller than it had been years ago, and scars ran jagged beneath the surface, just visible around his hind leg and side. Yet his eyes, those golden brown eyes, never left Noah. Abby opened the door before he could knock. She was in her 30s with tired eyes and a quiet grace. Her sweater sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and her hair was tied back in a loose bun. She looked surprised, then relieved, and simply stepped aside without a word, allowing man and dog to pass. Inside the house was filled with the warm smell of cinnamon and old books. Scout moved through the hallway like he'd been there forever, but when Noah paused to speak to Abby, the dog whined sharply and nudged his leg until he moved again. "He hasn't acted like this with anyone before," Abby said gently, watching from the kitchen door. "He's been quiet, calm, but never like this." Noah crouched beside Scout and gently placed his hand on the dog's neck. Scout leaned into it, eyes half closing. "I think he remembers," Noah said quietly. From behind a half-open door, a small face peeked out. Tommy Monroe, 7 years old, stood barefoot on the wooden floor. He had a sketch pad tucked under one arm, his other hand holding the edge of the doorway. His shaggy brown hair fell over wide gray eyes, eyes that watched everything but revealed very little. Tommy hadn't spoken since he was 4. A silence Abby had once told a neighbor came from grief that language couldn't reach. Now he watched the scene unfolding in front of him with a strange stillness. Scout turned and saw him. His tail gave a slow, gentle wag. Tommy took a cautious step forward. Noah watched silently as the boy knelt a few feet from the dog and offered a hand palm open. Scout leaned forward and gave it a soft lick, then turned back to press against Noah's knee again. Tommy smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just a slight curl of the mouth, a flash of something warm, something that hadn't surfaced in a long time. Abby saw it and covered her mouth. He never, not in months. Noah said nothing. He simply let his hand rest on Scout's back, feeling the steady thump of the tail on the floorboards and the weight of a presence that had once been lost, now found again. Noah hadn't slept much. Morning broke pale and cold across the town of Evergrove, and though the world outside stirred quietly beneath the weight of frost, His mind raced with images that hadn't surfaced in years: dust-filled roads, the sharp crack of distant gunfire, the acrid stench of burned tires. And Scout, always Scout, lunging into danger before Noah could call him back. Now, the dog lay curled at the foot of Abby's guest bed, eyes half closed but twitching in his sleep as if chasing shadows only he could see. Noah stood by the window, with a mug of coffee gone cold in his hand, staring out at the thick line of trees beyond the backyard. Scout's reappearance had cracked something open in him. There were questions now, dangerous ones, the kind no one in command had ever wanted answered. After Abby and Tommy left for the morning, the boy bundled in a navy blue puffer jacket and a red knit cap. Noah asked to stay behind. Abby agreed, trusting more than she meant to. She had to drop Tommy at school and head to her small veterinary clinic near Main Street, a pale brick building with ivy climbing up its side and a wind chime over the door that tinkled like birdsong. Alone, Noah booted up his old military-issued laptop, the one he'd buried under tools and forgotten projects in his garage for years. The system still booted slow, but sure a digital fossil of his past life. He scrolled through archived folders until he found the one labeled K9 Scout 42B. His fingers hovered, then clicked. Reports flooded the screen: patrol summaries, field behavior logs, medical scans. Then something odd, a final entry dated days after the explosion. It wasn't a casualty report as he'd been told. It was a transfer request. Recipient Talonbridge Security Services. Status cleared. Asset reassigned. New ID K9 LK7A. Lucky Noah leaned back, jaw tightening. Scout hadn't died. He'd been repurposed, stripped of his name, stripped of his service, shipped off like surplus gear to a private entity. He remembered whispers about such companies, Talonbridge among them contractors who scooped up retired military dogs for shadow operations abroad. They weren't known for mercy. He copied the file to a thumb drive and slipped it into his pocket, his mind already calculating next steps. If someone had taken Scout, lied about it, and then dumped him like trash near a railway, he needed to know who and why. Downstairs, Scout stood when Noah entered the kitchen, his ears pricked, tail wagging once, then twice. Noah scratched behind one ear and whispered, "You remember more than you let on, don't you, buddy?" That afternoon, Abby returned early. She found Noah in her living room, surrounded by old printouts and Scout curled protectively beside him. "I think they sold him," Noah said, not looking up, "to a civilian outfit called Talonbridge after the blast. They told me he was gone, but they just didn't want me to look." Abby sat slowly in the armchair across from him. She wore her clinic scrubs forest green and speckled faintly with dog fur. Her cheeks were flushed from the wind, and there was a line of weariness just beneath her eyes. "I've heard of them," she said softly. "They've come through town before, hired security for a logging company last year, stayed a week, then vanished." Noah folded the printout in half. "I'm going to find out what they did to him." Abby hesitated. "Be careful, Noah. Some things get buried for a reason." Before he could respond, the front door creaked open and Tommy stepped inside, boots thudding on the mat. He paused when he saw them, eyes flicking between his mother Noah and the scattered papers. Then, without a word, he sat cross-legged near the hearth and pulled out his notebook. He drew with slow, deliberate strokes, his brow-furrowed lips pressed tight. Noah watched as the image formed a broad desert lined with low mountains. A Humvee, a man in uniform. And beside him, a dog with pointed ears and a vest strapped tight across its chest. Noah's blood chilled. "He's never been to the desert," Abby whispered. "He's never seen your pictures. He's never heard your stories. I don't even let him watch war documentaries." Tommy turned the page and kept drawing. This time there was smoke tendrils curling into the sky, a crude explosion, and a dark shape leaping between it and the man. Scout stirred at the boy's side, lifting his head as if sensing the memory. Then Tommy paused, glanced at Noah, and added a red cross over the dog's shoulder. A field medic patch, just like Scout's. How would he know that Abby breathed? Noah didn't answer. The boy didn't speak, but somehow, through dream's memory connection, or something deeper, he knew. The drawings weren't fantasy, they were fragments. Shards of something Scout had lived through and somehow passed on. That night, as the wind picked up outside and pine branches scraped the windows, Noah sat on the porch while Scout lay stretched beside him, head on his paws, eyes open. The boy had gone to bed without protest. Abby stayed downstairs reading quietly, but glancing toward the door every few minutes. Noah sipped his coffee and stared at the sky. "They changed your name," he murmured, "but not who you are." Scout shifted closer. "We'll find out the rest. Together." The wind answered with a long sigh through the trees. Somewhere down the street, a siren wailed faintly and faded. But inside the house, there was only stillness, the kind that comes just before the truth begins to rise. Noah sat on the edge of Abby's back porch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the overgrown yard. Scout lay beside him, sprawled out on his side, golden fur rippling gently in the breeze. As Noah absently ran his fingers through the dog's coat, his hand paused. Something beneath the fur felt uneven, raised hard. He pushed the hair aside and saw it a scar long and pale just above the ribs. It wasn't shrapnel. He leaned closer, parting the fur further along Scout's flank. Another mark, thinner this time, ran across the skin like the lash of a cord. His fingers followed the line slowly. It was old but unmistakable, inflicted by something man-made. Not war, not accident, a hand. Scout didn't flinch, but his eyes shifted, slightly alert, now watching Noah's face. Noah whispered, "Someone did this to you." Later that evening, inside the house, Abby moved around the kitchen in quiet motions, her face drawn. She had noticed the change in Noah's expression when he walked in. Now, as he stood by the window, staring out into the dimming woods with Scout resting at his feet, she finally spoke. "You found the scars, didn't you?" Noah nodded. "Some are from the field. I've seen what bombs do, but not these. These are straight, clean. Someone hit him." Repeatedly. Abby swallowed, then set down her mug with both hands. There was a man, a few weeks ago, tall, dark hair, wearing a utility jacket with a security patch on the sleeve, said he was checking the power lines. Noah turned, eyes narrowing, and Scout lost it, she said. "I've never seen him like that. He was at the front window when the man walked up the drive. He started growling deep low, then barking, not scared, angry, like he recognized something. Noah stepped closer. Did he approach the house? No. He stopped halfway. Scout was barking so violently I thought he'd break the glass. The man didn't say a word. He just turned and walked off. Noah asked, 'You ever see him again?' Abby shook her head. 'Not since, but I haven't stopped thinking about it.' Scout, lying on the floor nearby, let out a quiet huff, and for the first time since the reunion, Noah saw something new in the dog's eyes. Beneath the loyalty and longing, there was a memory. One that hadn't faded. Noah sat cross-legged on the cold garage floor, a worn metal storage trunk open beside him. Late afternoon light filtered through a dusty window, casting a faded glow across old military files and yellowed photographs spread out around him. Scout lay a few feet away, head resting on his front paws, watching in quiet patience. Noah's fingers dug through a packet labeled K9 Unit 42B. He flipped past mission summaries and medical reports until his hand stopped on a photo. It showed him in full combat gear, crouched beside Scout, both looking tired but ready. And there, standing just behind them, was a man Noah hadn't thought about in years. Graham Reeve. The back of the photograph confirmed it. Handler Reeve G. Reeve had joined their unit late in the deployment, civilian contractor, ex-military background. Tall, solid build, always wore tactical sunglasses even indoors. He'd taken over Scout's handling temporarily when Noah was injured during a patrol. It was only supposed to be for a week, but then came the IED, the confusion and the lie. Scout had died. Noah stared at the image for a long moment before placing it aside and standing up. He carried the photo into the house where Abby was setting the table for dinner. She glanced up when he entered, wiping her hands on a towel. "Do you know the name Graham Reeve?" Noah asked. Abby thought for a second. "I think I've heard it. Isn't he connected to some private security firm near Maple Hollow?" Noah nodded slowly. "He worked with my unit overseas, last person to handle Scout before the explosion." Abby looked concerned but didn't press further. Instead, she called out for Tommy to wash up. Moments later, Tommy appeared at the kitchen doorway, his sketchbook clutched in one hand, the other curled slightly around Abby's pant leg. His eyes were wide and his face looked pale, unsettled. He said nothing as always, but he handed the book to Abby and pointed to the page he had just drawn. It showed Scout, clearly recognizable, even in the childlike lines cowering on the ground. A tall man loomed over him mid-swing with a baton or stick frozen in a brutal arc. The man wore dark clothing, and his face was left blank except for a harsh frown and dark glasses. Abby's voice trembled. "Tommy, where did you see this?" The boy turned away, pressed his face into his mother's side, and pointed toward the hallway. Abby knelt down beside him. "Was it at the store?" Tommy nodded. Noah crouched beside them. "Did you see this man today?" Tommy hesitated, then nodded again, slower this time. His hand reached back to the drawing and tapped the corner of the page. A small sign had been added behind the man, a crate of oranges and the outline of a grocery awning. It was Evergrove Market. Abby looked at Noah. He saw Reeve. Noah glanced back at the photo in his hand, then at the drawing. A knot tightened in his chest. "He's here." Scout, still lying in the hallway, let out a quiet growl, low and distant like thunder, just beyond the trees. The air in Evergrove turned brittle by evening, the temperature dropping fast as the last of the light slipped behind the dark line of pine trees surrounding Abby's property. The wind carried a whisper of coming frost, and even the birds had gone quiet. Inside the house, the lights were dimmed low, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. Scout lay near the front door, unmoving except for his eyes, which flicked toward every window and creak of the walls. He was waiting. Watching. Noah had locked all doors twice and moved a heavy chair beneath the back doorknob. He stood near the kitchen with a flashlight in one hand and a tool case in the other. Abby watched him silently from across the room. She was pale, dressed in an oversized cardigan over a faded t-shirt, her hair loose and falling in tired waves. She hadn't said much since Tommy's drawing. The boy sat on the couch with Scout nearby, his fingers running anxiously along the spine of his sketchbook. The pages were blank now. He hadn't drawn since that afternoon. His shoulders were tense, and his eyes never left Scout. At 9:03 p.m., the porch light flickered once and died. Scout stood. Noah reached for the light switch and tried flipping it back. Nothing. He checked the breaker, still intact. Then the house went completely dark. "Noah," Abby whispered. "The power's out." "I know," he said. "Stay with Tommy. Don't move unless I say so." Noah grabbed the emergency flashlight and a wrench he had left on the side table. He moved quietly to the hallway and crouched low near the window, peering through the edge of the curtain. In the moonlight, faint and silvery, he saw movement, two figures by the edge of the tree line, dressed in dark clothes, moving slowly and low. One approached the back of the house. The other veered toward the shed. Both moved with training. Then a third man stepped into view, taller than the others, his walk more confident, like someone in control. Even in the faint glow, Noah recognized the squared shoulders and rigid posture. Graham Reeve. Noah turned back inside. "They're here." Scout growled deep and guttural. Abby clutched Tommy to her chest. The boy pressed his face into her shoulder, trembling. Seconds later, glass shattered in the laundry room. Noah raised his flashlight and flicked it toward the noise, catching the reflection of a boot just stepping through the window frame. He shouted. Back, and Scout lunged past him, teeth bared, hurling himself into the dark corridor. A man grunted, then screamed. Scout collided with the first intruder before he was fully inside, sending him crashing back into the broken window. The sound of tearing fabric and a choked yell echoed through the house. Another window shattered, this time in the living room. Noah moved fast, pulling Abby and Tommy into the hallway closet. "Stay here. Don't open this door for anyone but me," he said, pressing it shut and jamming a broom handle through the side rail. Scout came racing back into the hall, blood on his muzzle fur bristled. He stopped only to glance at Noah, then darted back toward the front of the house. The second man burst through the living room window, rolling to his feet with a flashlight in one hand and what looked like a stun baton in the other. Noah tackled him before he could rise. They hit the floor hard, Noah's shoulder crashing into a side table as the baton clattered away. The man threw a wild punch, but Noah blocked it and slammed the wrench into his side. A wheeze, a gasp, and then silence. The man slumped. Scout barked from the porch, sharp and rapid. Noah staggered to his feet and ran toward the sound. Outside, Reeve had made it to the porch steps. He stood there, face half lit by the moon, holding something in his right hand, metal slim, unmistakable. A pistol. Scout stood between him and the front door, unmoving, his teeth bared. "Move," Reeve said flatly. Scout didn't. "I don't want to shoot you, dog," Reeve hissed. From behind, Noah's voice came like a growl. "Then don't." Reeve turned, but too late. Noah tackled him hard against the porch railing. The gun fired once, missing. They struggled in the half-dark fists and knees, curses, and broken breath. Reeve fought like a man used to violence. But Noah fought like a man with something to lose. Scout leapt in, fangs sinking into Reeves' arm. The man's scream dropped the weapon and fell to the floorboards. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance. The sound of sirens grew louder, closer. Reeve tried to crawl away, clutching his bleeding arm, but Scout pinned him, growling low and constant. A snarl filled with every scar that dog had carried for years. Two sheriff cruisers skidded into the driveway moments later, gravel spraying from their tires. Deputy Marla Briggs, short, muscular, in her mid-40s with jet-black braids tied behind her head, burst from the first car, weapon drawn. Behind her, Officer Dale Kendrick, broad-shouldered and silent, as always, swept the perimeter. "Step back," Briggs ordered. Noah raised both hands and nodded toward Reeve. "He's the one." The others are inside, subdued. Briggs approached cuffed Reeve with practiced efficiency and read his rights as he groaned beneath her knee. Scout didn't move until Noah touched his shoulder. Only then did the retriever pull back his eyes, still locked on Reeve, the low growl still simmering deep in his chest. The morning after the attack broke with a clarity the town hadn't seen in weeks. Sharp blue skies stretching above the forested hills, sunlight cutting clean through the mist that usually clung to Evergrove. But inside Abby's living room, there was no peace. The air was taut, filled with the aftermath of adrenaline and the hum of too many voices talking at once. Graham Reeves sat handcuffed in the back of a sheriff's cruiser, outside a white bandage taped hastily over his arm, where Scout had torn in. Inside the house was buzzing with movement. A tall woman in a dark gray field suit stood by the fireplace, flipping through folders laid across the table. Her name was Special Agent Lila Corwin, early 40s African-American, with short-cropped hair and a clipped tone that suggested both precision and fatigue. She worked for the FBI's Criminal Investigations Division, and she hadn't slept, not since the call came in. Next to her stood Agent Caleb Dorsey, a lean man with sunken cheeks and pale skin that looked like it hadn't seen daylight in months. He wore glasses and kept tapping the corner of his tablet as he sorted through classified PDFs, highlighting and swiping silently. Noah sat on the edge of the couch, a bruise darkening along his cheekbone, and his right hand bandaged from punching Reeve during the struggle. Scout lay beside him, head resting on Noah's boot. His tail didn't wag. His eyes didn't close. He stayed still as if the weight of every scar had finally come to rest on his back. Agent Corwin spoke first. "We've confirmed Reeves' identity as well as his previous clearance with Talonbridge Security. He operated with limited oversight even when contracted under military-adjacent conditions. Most of his field activity isn't logged officially, at least not in anything that wasn't redacted." Noah nodded grimly. He was the last one to handle Scout before IED Day. Dorsey swiped again, then held up his tablet. "And here's where it gets worse. We recovered a hidden drive from the vehicle parked outside. It contained operation logs, names of K-9 units, including 42B Scout. Several of the files refer to him as LK-7A, not by name. Reeve had him reassigned after the blast, cited handler incapacitated as justification. Abby, who had remained near the hallway with Tommy, stepped into the room. Her hands were tucked in the sleeves of an oversized cream sweater. "So, he lied to the Army and just took Scout." Corwin looked at her. Not just took, reprogrammed. Noah's jaw tightened. "What does that mean exactly?" Dorsey scrolled and paused. "Behavioral conditioning. We think they ran him through a series of aversion drills and high-pressure trauma scenarios to overwrite loyalty. It's something experimental normally used in black-tier asset development, never tested on animals officially, but it worked enough for them to keep using him," Corwin finished. "Until he broke protocol, fled during a transport op. According to the last dated log, he went missing somewhere near a border camp 2 years ago." Noah exhaled slowly. "He didn't just run, he came home." Corwin nodded, and in doing so, he exposed everything. Outside, a second vehicle rolled into the driveway. From it stepped Lieutenant Mark Eddins, a clean-cut officer in full Army dress uniform, his chest decorated with service pins. He was in his mid-50s, tall, with a strong frame silver at his temples, and a reputation for being both meticulous and fair. He walked in with a thin leather folder and offered Noah a curt nod. "Mr. Carter," he said, voice steady. "On behalf of the Department of Defense, I want to first apologize for what was done to your K-9 unit and to you." Noah stood caught slightly off guard. "Sir." Eddins handed over the folder. "Effective immediately, your service record has been amended. All mention of Scout's presumed death has been retracted. The notation of your impaired judgment during the Kandahar ambush has also been removed. Noah opened the folder. His file now listed his actions as commendable under duress with full honors reinstated. His throat tightened. Thank you. Edens then turned to Scout. And this brave soul, he said, kneeling slowly, ignoring the protests from his stiff knees, is now officially retired from active classification. Scout Unit 42B is no longer government property. He's yours, Noah, permanently. Scout didn't move. He just pressed his head gently against Edens' hand, as if understanding. A silence followed. Heavy. Healing. Later, when the agents and officers had left, Abby brewed a fresh pot of coffee and set it on the table. Tommy sat on the floor with Scout one small hand gently rubbing the dog's back. The boy hadn't said a word, but his eyes followed every moment like he was memorizing something sacred. You did it, Abby said softly, sitting next to Noah. You brought the truth back. Noah stared at Scout. No, he did. The trees of Evergrove stood tall under the late spring sky, their branches swaying lazily in the warm afternoon breeze. The sound of the creek that bordered the edge of the property ran soft and steady, a soothing rhythm against the chorus of birds overhead. Just past the tree line on a gentle slope facing west, a newly built log cabin stood modest in size, but rich in warmth. The cedar walls glowed amber in the sunlight, the roof a dark green that matched the forest canopy above. Noah had built it himself, board by board, over the course of 3 patient months. The cabin stood just a short walk from Abby's house, close enough for company, far enough for quiet. A narrow stone path led from the porch to a fenced-in garden, where a small patch of wildflowers bloomed. Beside it was a fenced yard, and at the center of it, all beneath the shade of a large sycamore tree, Scout lay sprawled out on the grass, panting gently, eyes half closed. He looked older now, his golden coat still thick but touched with silver around the muzzle. His movement slower but still deliberate. There was a calm to him that hadn't existed before, as if the tension that had wrapped itself around his bones for years had finally loosened. He was finally at peace. Tommy played nearby, chasing the wind with a red pinwheel in hand. He wore rolled-up jeans and a faded dinosaur t-shirt, bare feet moving with certainty across the soft grass. His brown hair curled at the edges from sweat and sun, and his cheeks were flushed with joy. Every few moments he would glance at Scout as if checking in, and the dog would lift his head slightly in acknowledgement before settling again. Noah watched from the porch steps, his elbows resting on his knees, a mug of black coffee cooling between his palms. His beard had grown fuller, and he wore a flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, jeans stained with sawdust and resin. His eyes followed Tommy, then Scout, then the outline of Abby, approaching from the trail that cut through the trees. She carried a cloth basket filled with strawberries and a worn paperback novel tucked under one arm. She wore a linen blouse sleeves pushed to her elbows and simple sandals. Her long hair was tied back in a loose braid. She smiled as she approached, not the tentative smile she once wore, but one full and easy. You need a bigger garden, she teased, holding up the basket. Scout would just steal the berries, Noah replied, rising to meet her. He doesn't even like strawberries. Doesn't stop him. They laughed softly, the kind of laughter that came from having survived something neither fully understood. Abby handed him the basket and sat beside him, watching Tommy twirl with the wind. He's been different lately, she said. More open. He's starting to let go, Noah said. Just a little. As if to underscore the moment, Tommy paused by Scout, knelt beside the dog, and rested a hand on his back. Then after a quiet moment, he turned toward them, opened his mouth, and said almost shyly, Scout. The word landed in the air like a prayer. Abby blinked. Her hand moved to her mouth. Did you? Noah nodded, eyes fixed on the boy. Yeah, I heard it too. Tommy smiled wide this time, full of pride, and said the name again. Scout. The dog lifted his head tail, thumping softly, and gave a low, contented bark. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the sky turned shades of pink and burnt gold, Noah sat with Scout beneath the sycamore tree. Abby had taken Tommy home for the night, but promised to return for breakfast. The stars would come soon, but for now, the hush of twilight held the land in a kind of reverence. Scout lay beside him, stretched out his breath, slow, steady. Noah reached over, fingers gently raking through the thick fur along his neck. You didn't just survive, he whispered, voice thick with the kind of emotion too old to be named. "You came home to save us all." Scout didn't move, but his tail gave one slow wag, the rhythm of a heart that had never stopped waiting. And in that moment, there was nothing left to prove, no pain that hadn't been honored, no fear that hadn't already been faced. Only the peace of knowing that home wasn't a place they found. It was something they'd built together. Sometimes the miracles we pray for don't come as thunder or lightning. Sometimes they walk back into our lives on four legs, wearing scars instead of armor and carrying love instead of anger. Scout didn't just survive. He was sent back, not by fate alone, but by the unseen grace of a God who hears even the silent cries we forget to say aloud. In a world that often forgets loyalty, we are reminded through stories like this one that redemption is real, healing is possible, and no soul man or animal is ever truly abandoned. When we care for the forgotten, when we protect the voiceless, when we honor those who suffer quietly, we become part of something bigger, something sacred. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who believes in second chances. Comment amen below to send a blessing to all the scouts out there still trying to find their way home. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of love, loyalty, and divine purpose. May God bless you and all those who wait in silence hoping someone will come back for them.